Good afternoon, everyone, and it's 12:30, and it's Holistic Hour, broadcasting here from Mitchell in the Maranoa, and going out to all over Australia. Here I've got my colleague Jeff Campbell on the line as well. How are you there, Jeff?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Judith.
All right, and we've got a few attendees online, so we may actually just. I see, Gavin, you've got you're unmuted today. Can you hear us, Gavin? Not sure. Hold on. I have to have a look and see if we can get Gavin to speak with us. That'd be fun. Rightio. So this week I just thought I'd cover a little bit off about the Savory Hub network and just put up this screen which shows all of the hubs within the world, and the green dots are the candidates, the hub candidates, which is us here in the Maranoa. And we're trying very hard at the moment to make this little green dot over on the side here become an orange dot, which will be an accredited hub. And process for that is that we are working through, we've done most of the paperwork and we're up to contract negotiation stage. So that needs to go back through the whole of the Landcare group so that we all are on the same page. And then we will be going back to the Savory network, the Savory Institute, to discuss with them again. And that's hope to get that all done before we launch into the Artisans of the Grasslands conference, which is coming up on the 2nd of October this year. Okay, people are very welcome to ask us questions in the chat section. So I'll just remind you that you can go down to either the chat section or the questions. And just remember that when you do put those questions, try and click it so that you can send it to everyone. And then I should be able to answer that. And while I can see that everyone's actually muted, but I wonder if I unmute Gavin there. I'm just wondering if you can speak now, Gavin. No, I always need more practice at unmuting and muting people. Let's just see how we go anyway. All right, so this week we are working on the mineral cycle, which is part of Unit 2. And if you go into your module section, you can view through all of the topics for this week. So it starts off with the soil food web, and then the 3 parts of the cycle, which is the minerals to the surface, above ground to the surface, and the surface to the underground. And then we're working on these questions here at the bottom this week. Okay, the mineral cycle is maximising the flow of nutrients through plants and soils. And if you're reading along in the holistic management book, we can't find ours today in the office here. We must have left it at home, but the pages are from 141 to 148 in the holistic management, a new framework for decision making. Okay, now I've taken this directly from the course materials, and it talks about identifying if you've got a good mineral cycle or a poor mineral cycle at your place. And I was commenting to Jeffrey yesterday, I was down in one of our paddocks doing some beekeeping, and I will admit to you that the bees are pretty much, well, they've got a lot of honey. They've built up a lot of honey, and so they're fairly feisty. So I've got a fire bucket, and I was looking at all of the litter on the ground thinking this is going to be interesting because there is a lot of litter on the ground. And when I was talking to Jeffrey, he said, well, that happens when you first start to change your management practices, that you actually get a lot of litter on the ground because there's not as many bugs on the ground. You know, you're still building up that community that's going to break down all that litter on the ground. And Jeffrey, you were recalling a story there earlier when you started your holistic management, when you had a little bit of it. You didn't realise how hot the fire would burn when you had, not many of your bugs working. Tell us a bit about that one.
Yeah, good, Judith. Yeah, we started it, and it was back in 2001 at a place Jackie and I went out and started a bit of a fire. We were just going to burn a break, and we're pretty proud of all our litter we'd put on the ground in 2 or 3 years of holistic management. But it was all building up there. It was still on the ground, and just nothing was there breaking it down. And yeah, and we called it ground zero because we burned 75% of the place. We burned about 45,000 acres or more. But after that, it was pretty hard to get back on, and Up at Craigmore, our block we had up there for a while, and Dion used to spray molasses and water and stuff on the ground, and it just got so hungry, that ground. He used to say, "Oh, this ground just swallows litter, just swallows ground meat." You'd go up there and there'd be, quite a mat on the ground. In a couple of months it'd be all gone because the bugs and worms and stuff up there just so much more aggressive than down here. Yeah. So yeah, that's something you do got to watch out with. That litter does burn, so and it's when it's builded up on the ground, but you do have to build the bugs up as well. So his idea was to feed the bugs, and he sprayed it with a bit of a mixture of stuff and bred the bugs up to eat the mulch. Yeah.
So that's
So
water and molasses just in a backpack or something, was it?
yeah, he just put that through his spray machine. Yeah, through his thing, but a couple of different ways. But there is other bits of mixtures that you can get and put other stuff in it as well, and even buy stuff and put in it. Yeah, Judith, yeah, you feed the bugs and
Mm.
breed the bugs up. But there's quite a lot in that if you want to go down that track, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was definitely wondering how long the hose was, and I decided it wasn't quite long enough to get down to there, so it would have been very interesting. So we're just going to work through these questions. There's 9 multiple choice questions at the back of that first module, and each one has the same statement in front of it. So each statement describes an aspect of the mineral cycle. Note if the statements indicate an effective mineral cycle by answering true to those that do. And the first question is soil surface is porous and rich in organic matter. Is that true or false? And I've got the polls set up. Oh goodness. And I've clicked off the polls. Here we go. So we'll select it as a poll and launch. So I think that should give you a chance to be able to say whether you think that one's true or false. So most people say, well, everyone says that's true, and I would say that that would be your answer as well, Jeffrey.
Yes, that's right. That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a visitor. Um, righto. So the next part that we're going to go on with, I had this I had this came from off the Savory Institute. I've got the reference to the resource at the end if people are interested. I'll have to close this poll. Can you? There we go. Share. So you can see that's 100. All right. So now I think you should be able to see back to the slides. And this was I just collected this because we were actually talking a fair bit of carbon yesterday. Jeffrey and I, we had some visitors from Sydney out, and we were looking at soil carbon, vegetation carbon options. And they mentioned to us about Christine Jones and Elaine Ingham's work to do with the liquid pathway, about how that soil carbon goes through the surface. And I just thought it was very interesting, Jeffrey, in the course materials it talks about, you know, soil that doesn't have that aeration in it. It just looks like cake mix, like flour and fairly dead. But on the other side here, this is more crumbly, almost like cake that's been cooked, and that's simply just the more 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 nutrients and more roots growing down into the soil. Very good.
Yeah, great, Judith. And it always amazes me, when you see bull dust and stuff, how bad it is. It sort of can run like water. It's just so dense and just like flour or something. But and with that other soil that you get, it's got a great smell about it too, a real earthy smell. And you can see that fella there with his with the dark side. I suppose it's his left hand. Yeah, his left hand. It's it would have a real earthy sort of smell about it, where the other one wouldn't, I would imagine. Yeah.
Mm.
I always think that's a good way to test soil as well, is to smell it if you grab a handful of soil, especially on cultivations, I guess. But you can do it otherwise too. You can just smell more soil and it smells real earthy and stuff. Yeah. It's usually, it's working, the mineral cycle's working well then, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for that. Right. So next question. Shallow plant roots, many lacking deep penetration. Is that true or false? So I'll just go to the next poll, which we can launch there. See if what people think that is. We were having a look at the daisies yesterday. Daisies come out on Dreamland a bit as well, but we were making comments. We had these guys in the car and we were looking at these daisies that had come out in an area. Was that an area that had been fairly bare there, Jeff, that we were looking at yesterday, and it had quite a carpet of these white daisies?
Yeah, it is, Judith. And we talk about succession and stuff. I'd say that's an area that succession's probably not going well. It was really hammered pretty bad. Before I'd sort of started doing holistic stuff and grazing it properly, and that was down in the trough there where cattle always hung about, and all the paper daisies come up. But anything that takes over, any annual that takes over like that, that's got room to take over, is usually bare ground there. So although they look pretty good and they're a good conversation piece, and I just brought up the thing, oh yeah, but they're an annual, blah blah, where the buffle was really thick and the perennial grasses were thick, there was hardly any daisies, of course.
Yeah.
So it's just a discussion point, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we all think this is false. This answer this question. Do you think that's the same, Jeff?
Yes, I'll agree, that's false.
All right. So the next slide I've got is some photos of the actual root system, and it always interests me that this brown onto the roots, if you try and wash all the dirt off the roots, it still will stay there, and that's what Elaine Ingham refers to as the exudates and the carbon highway or superhighway, where the roots are actually having that process right next to them between the soil and the root. And it's a pretty good root system there on that particular little plant too, would you say?
Yeah, very good, Judith. And that's like, I think with your buffalo grass, that's continually grazed too, you can probably walk through it with your working boots on and not tread on any plants. And some of the little stubble you'd nearly kick out with your boots. But when they got roots like that, you can see, it's going to take a bit of kicking out or washing out. It's got a good grip on the plant, hasn't it? And I'd say, that's probably been grazed correctly. She's ready to grow. She's ready to take off.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next question. Shallow plant roots, many lacking deep penetration. Oh no, we're going backwards now. Here we go. Next one. Here we go. Into 3. Surface litter. The cover is sparse and immature. Oxidizing material rests on the surface or on the soil surface. So we'll just put this one up. Hold on. Hide. Surface litter cover. I'll launch that one so people can see that one. Surface litter cover is sparse and immature. That's, when you were talking about you could walk through the paddock and not actually stand on any grass, I guess. You could just stand on bare ground. And then the oxidizing, that's when the grass becomes that sort of grey colour. People are having a little bit more of a think about this one. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, probably, Judith. I probably need to read the surface litter covered space in which oxidizing materials on the soil surface. I'd have to say it was false. That's not an effective water cycle.
Yeah, we agree. It's false. All right. Question 4.
It's strange, if I just have a comment here, it's strange when you get cockies together, of course, they talk about this sort of stuff, and one way to get a debate or you'll even get an argument going is over grass that grows under trees or it doesn't grow under trees, and of course it's in different areas, and it always amazes me. I would suggest it's to do with the mineral cycle. Sometimes even when a tree's been dead for years, with an old torden tree or rungbark in the grass, they'll still grow better under it. And probably still getting the residual effect from the minerals from the tree, etc. And then sometimes the cattle won't eat it. It can be nice and green under a tree, but they like eating it out. So there's a lot of complexity there. And I think a lot of it's to do with the mineral cycle and the water cycle. You know, the people that it doesn't grow under the trees, well, probably the water cycle is the most limiting factor for them. The trees might be taking too much water, and that's what a lot of people think. And in some areas that's the case, and then in other areas where the mineral cycle is probably the most limiting factor, well, the grass does grow under trees. So it's just a point of interest. You know, I haven't got any answer to it, or there's no set rule. It's just how complex the situation is, I guess. And but it always does amaze me. Cattle really don't like eating it under the trees so much, and I just wonder if that's to do with the carbon. And even in the morning, they tell me the leaves and the grass are probably not as nutritious as after the sun's been on them for a few hours. So that photosynthesis part is working pretty well. There's a lot of energy in the leaves, and then it goes down through the plant through the night. So yeah, there's some interesting things there, and I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to it. It's just the mineral cycle and the water cycle, and we need to have them working as effectively as possible, I guess.
So this photo is from the Savory resources, and it was linking back to what you said before about the grass standing there, and it's not cycling. So the point about this is it's gone grey, it's oxidising, and it's just standing there. The thing I didn't realise was that the trees will drop leaves even if they're not deciduous. You can find under any tree it will drop some of its leaves, but grass is unable to drop any of its leaves unless something happens, hail hits it, or animals trample it, or something runs over it, or when it's actually more useful, an animal might eat that. So the grasses actually rely on the livestock to actually trim that. Otherwise, it just stands there, and it's the mineral cycle. It's whatever is caught up in. There's a lot of carbon in there, and other minerals as well. And they're actually being held in limbo and not cycling at all. And Savory makes the comment that the mineral cycle is like the economy. I suppose all four cycles are like the economy. You have to keep them going, and the faster you can keep them going, and the more inputs you have, the better the system's going to be. And this is an example of where you've got stuff held upright off the soil, and it won't, even if you've got bacteria there, it won't decompose, and it won't actually, it'll stay there for 3 or 4 years in a brittle environment. Have you sort of had that happen to you?
Yes, Judith, you're talking about, and you know, of course, the sunlight and that can't get down to the growth parts. So yeah, it needs to be either, and that's why people use fire. Then of course they think, oh, this has got to be burnt, so they burn it, which does work. And for a while, you know, but continually burning it, you're probably losing a lot of your minerals. Sorry, Judith, I was just thinking. I don't know if I have a comment about. We hear a lot from people about the exporting of nutrients off your property when you're selling cattle and stuff. And I think it's so minimal that it's nearly insignificant. You know, like we export say an old cow that's bred all her life. Imagine how much nutrients and how much stuff she would have cycled in her lifetime, compared to the 400 or 500 kgs that you export away. It's so insignificant that it's nearly not worth talking about, really. But a lot of it we hear about the export of nutrients off the farm by selling our produce. But I think with animals, grazing animals, they're used as a tool, but they far outweigh that. They just cycle so much grass in their lifetime. It's just, I'd love to know how much, but it'd be tons and tons every year, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that comment, Jeff. That's a very good point. And I mean, Southwest Queensland has had a fairly good season for us around Mitchell and Morven compared to the previous droughts, at least. And as you know, as most people know, we've had all our sheep in a one mob since March, and they've been moving around, and all the ewes have just lambed. Now, we have to admit that last year none of them lambed. They weren't joined. It was so dry. And also, we're coming out of it. We've had a pretty good season compared to the other seasons, but we have never had so much fertility with the ewes. We haven't lamb marked yet, but there are still twins being born. There are so many little lambs. And Dad's tried a whole lot of things. At the conference last week, sorry, we saw, he'd done barley sprouting just to give them a bit of a kick, nutrient. We've done a whole lot of additives, licks and minerals and things you put in the water and all these sort of things. And this year, I mean, we could still be wrong, but this year has been the best that Dad can remember in terms of a lambing rate. He reckons it's up around the 90%. And we've got old ewes in there. We've got ewes that are white tag and black tag, so they'd be 2009, 2010, so they're not going to hold in 6 years old. And we've also got quite a few maiden ewes that running with the mob, so they may, they would be unlikely. They probably aren't having a lamb, so that would be affecting what we're calculating. So it'll be interesting when we do actually do the lamb marking, but just the ewes getting that extra little bit of green pick seems to be making an absolutely big difference in terms of their fertility. And we had all sorts of interesting things. People say, oh no, you can't do it with sheep because you'll get a break in the wool or all that sort of thing. Well, that hasn't happened at all. But what's happened is every couple of days they're getting new green fresh pick, and it's incredibly easy to do. So we couldn't be happier with how it's worked out this year. But as I say, it's probably got to be tested over 10 or 15 years to work out whether it actually is, a factor that's affecting it. But it's just very interesting to think about what's happened over the last 12 months on our property, at least. I don't know whether you've got any comment about that, Jeffrey. But
No, Judith, but this is what drives it, of course. You've seen stuff, you've seen your pick on the ground, and you're moving your sheep around and getting benefits already. I think it should only improve as your grasses improve. I could only see it improving. You'll probably find you'll run more stock. No, that's great, and this is what drives it, and what drives people once they see a bit of a win, and they just go for it, that's what drives them. Yeah, with cattle, I think probably we keep a little bit. You actually ration it out to them a little bit, in a real good time here. My cattle are probably not as good as the neighbours or around. They're doing pretty well. They're healthy. They're locked together. But you're actually making them eat a bit of old dry stuff as well. Using them as a tool a bit. In the dry time, they stay more constant. They don't have that up and down effect, And I think with fertility, this is probably hasn't been tested, but I think if a cow gets real fat and then she's got to live on that fat and digest that fat, etc. She's probably like a bit of a contraceptive to her for a while or something. They don't seem to go in calf while they're sort of losing that weight. I don't know if it's sort of a nature thing or if their liver's overloaded or whatever, but but definitely the sort of medium conditional cows seem to go into weight a lot better, or if they're gaining weight especially, they go into weight a lot better than if a big cow losing weight. So.
That's really interesting, very interesting. Question 5. If the plant spacing is wide with large areas of exposed soil present, so let me just have a look at that. Plant spacing is wide. Oh, I might have missed a question there, actually. Anyway, let's have a look at this one. The plant spacing is wide with large areas of exposed soil. Is that true or false in terms of a good mineral cycle? Oh, we're fairly sure about this one. We're selecting.
Yeah, Judith, I think we put false for that one.
Yeah.
These are just coming straight off of the course that Judith and I have been working through, of course. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's onto that. So if you've got the bare ground in between your perennials, of course, you've got weeds, etc., moving in and evaporation and water running off, etc. So now everyone's up to speed with that. It's good to have it all locked up solid with perennial grass, as much leaf as you can.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, solar panels, the size of your solar panels and whether your perennial grasses actually have larger leaves. But it's interesting just to have a look at what is growing and what has a larger leaf. So in question 6, the rapid turnover of plant material and old vegetation breaks down readily. I'll just see if we can put that one up. That one's, hold on. Yep, there we go. So rapid turnover of plant material and old vegetation breaks down readily. And I guess we're assuming this is a non-brittle environment, aren't we, really?
Yeah, Judith, I don't know if everyone's answered. I'd definitely put true for that one. It'd be good to have that happening. Just a comment on your leaf of your perennial plants. You'll find that most of the improved grasses, or most of the grasses that evolve with cattle, have a medium range, sort of fairly broad leaf. A lot of our native grasses here in Australia that evolved with fire, etc., more suited to a damaged water cycle, and probably didn't rely on cattle to spread, etc. They probably more relied on the spear grass and stuff, getting hooked in a wallaby or whatever, and actually some of them just are designed to burrow down into bare soil to spread. So yeah, I think there's a difference in the species there, like the medium of the range ones that grew on these grasslands and evolved with herding animals are some of the improved pastures that we brought in here, and they're the ones that are great for cattle. So if we're going to have a cattle industry, we've got to have what's good for them, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
I'm just thinking about how we hear a lot about, people spraying out buffalo in national parks and spraying buffalo out and stuff, and it's a bit too late. I think, like, we wouldn't have a cattle industry in Queensland, I don't think, if we didn't have buffalo grass.
Yeah, that came up yesterday when we had the guys from Sydney in the car. They were asking us about the buffel grass too. This slide is just from the Savory Institute slides, I think, and it just has, of course, the trees, leaves will fall down from the tree. Of course, sheep are great at going along and picking up all the leaves underneath the wild orange trees. They'll actually go every day. There must be a lot of nutrients in them, and pick up, just eat the leaves that fall out of the orange tree every day. And then you've got all the grasses. You can see there's a different depth of root structures, which also gives you some diversity. And then you see the animals there cycling that themselves through their gut. And of course, there's a whole lot of bacteria inside the animals, inside a rumen's inside a rumen. It's basically biology inside there. So when it comes out the other end, it's already impregnated with a whole lot of really good organisms that then started processing on the ground. So your livestock are giving the material, breaking down the material much quicker for you. And of course, they're not the only ones. All of the wildlife in your soil that you don't necessarily notice or see is also breaking it down. And then you've got your trees bringing up the nutrients from lower. And this is something we were talking about yesterday as well, Jeffrey. Whether the debate, and my dad I know is the same. He's quite likely to clear the whole thing to be a plain. And my daughter often asks him, did you think of leaving any trees, Granddad? And the idea that some trees can be useful in bringing up the nutrients, that they're part of a larger system. And we were looking at a plain there on Kurrawarra and talking about whether if you made that into a plain, how long it would last as a plain, how long before it would go to bare ground.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Judith. I think our country, like everything's different. Everyone's different, of course. Our country definitely needs a few trees on it, I think. If we kept it there for a few generations of trees, I think we'd definitely damage the mineral cycle. Just some of the shelter. Also, besides the nutrients, they give a bit of shelter, and the trees, and some of it, of course, cattle eat a few of the leaves, as you say. Not all of them, but some of them. So I think our country does need a few trees on it for long-term sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it, Jeff? I think that the sheep eat more leaves off the ground. Well, at least, myth, I haven't studied it in great depth, but I think they spend a lot of time eating all the leaves off the ground. And I was noticing your sheep there, your Damaras, and when we were watching them in the paddock there, and they've got the most amazing hairs underneath their chins. And Dad was reminding me about those hairs underneath their chin. It's not necessarily the smell necessarily of things, but those hairs are supposed to help them to select what they're going to eat. And I guess cattle are pretty sloppy, but cattle must have those hairs underneath their chin that supposedly help them to select grass as well, do they?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a new one on me, Judith. I think probably not. They a bit more graze like elephants. I think they just take big mouthfuls. Whereas the sheep would be a bit more selective, and goats are like I call them geek, those ones, because they're the maras. I'm not sure if they're goats or sheep, but yeah, I think they're a little bit more selective. I think cattle probably just bite in big mouthfuls, and they do take a bit of dry stuff if there's some new growth down low. They have to take a bit of dry stuff as well. So I wouldn't know. I couldn't really comment on that. But I think horses graze it differently again. They actually bite more, of course,
Mm,
and maybe they might be a bit more selective, but they can handle a bit of dry stuff. But yeah, cattle seem to just take a step when you're watching them feeding, and they'll just move their head around and take everything in that radius that their neck moves, and then they'll take another half a step, like one leg, and do the same. And they often just graze uniform like that, but they will select out plants, of course. Yeah, but if
mm,
there's a plant there that they like, they do sort of graze in mouthfuls, I would say,
mm.
more so than probably sheep and goats that are probably little Bambi type things that can get in amongst the prickly bushes, like what we saw in South Africa. In amongst everything seems to have prickles on it, and they get in and just nibble away at those little leaves a bit more selectively. Yeah, it's just a comment. I'm just
Yeah.
commenting. I haven't got an answer to it.
Yeah, well, definitely watching them in a mob moving. They don't stay. They actually walk a little bit. They'll race to the next little patch, and we're always watching, in the field what they're actually eating and what they're leaving. It's very interesting, but also probably why sheep have such a bad reputation. I think city folks seem to think that sheep are probably a little bit worse, but it's probably just a management issue rather than a sheep issue. There's nothing wrong with the sheep, just how we manage them, I guess. Okay, question 7. High losses of minerals off the soil as well as losses due to leaching. I'll just get this one and open it. Um, we'll launch that one. Um, here in Mitchell, we're on this, the lip of the Maranoa River. It's probably quite a precarious situation, and no wonder that it flooded really. But it's very sandy and soily, and you notice the more you water, the more nutrients seem to be taken away. So it's definitely, there is a difference there if you've got very sandy soil. And I notice you've got quite a lot of sandy country on the Maranoa up in your place as well. So how did you find that once you started building up your ground cover? Did it make any difference to the sandy country or?
Judith, I think actually the sandy country responds better, or quicker might be the word. You know how it always gets away quick. The pick and stuff always gets away quick on sandy country.
Mm,
So you can actually probably give it 3 or 4 bits of grazings in the growing season if you're managing it properly. If I just had to answer, I'd have no proof of it, but I'd say the lighter sort of country responds to this better than heavier country. And when I was saying about we had that Craigmore up in central Queensland, um, it it was slower to respond up there and slower to respond to this. It did eventually, but I think you'll find that the lighter the country, the quicker the response, and that's sort of just the way it is after rain as well.
mm.
Um, so it does, light country does respond pretty good to it. I think we'd have to put false for this thing. Oh, you just flicked it up there, Judith.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's false. Yeah,
yeah.
these are too easy, aren't they? A
Yeah,
little
well,
bit.
no, that's good. That's just what we got. Just giving people a bit of an idea what we went through on the course. So
Yeah. Uh,
there's other interesting stuff there, like videos and stuff as well. So it's quite interesting working through the course, I found. Yeah.
Yeah. So number 8, large numbers of surface insects and microorganisms are present. So I'm going to go down to number 8 and we'll launch that one. Um, I'd never done monitoring like you do in holistic management. When we in other areas, we think monitoring is just putting in a picket and a number on the picket and taking a photo. But when Helen and Brian took us out and we did the full comprehensive monitoring, one of the things in the columns was how many insects and how many ants or insects could we actually find on the ground. And that was the first time, that I'd done monitoring where we actually looked at number of insects there and presence of ant holes or whatever it was. So I think that's what this really is getting at as well, that those insects are an important part of it. So we was going to say true for this one. I think
Yeah, we definitely say true. And I guess we covered a bit when we were talking earlier about we were talking about feeding the bugs. It was interesting. I was talking to Shane Joyce just recently. He was one of the early movers on this. He'd done the RCS stuff and got into this up at Theodore. And I guess some of you probably heard of Shane, a great fella. But the company, he'd done a lot of blade ploughing with brigalow. He had some pretty thick brigalow country, and he blade ploughed it in strips, etc. So they've done a lot of monitoring how the trees and that affected that. It's recently been sold. He's recently sold it to a mining company for carbon credits, and we were just discussing, and he said it was so important to bugs that he bought this new little block. I think he's still leasing that other place, but he's for grazing, but he's sold it for carbon credits, and he's bought a little place around Kilkeeve, and he said the day he arrived it was so important for him there to get these bugs and that working so he could get his mineral cycling that he done it that afternoon. He had the spray rig. That was the first thing he took, was spray rig, and sprayed to feed his bugs. So I thought, oh yeah, that's interesting, and that's all to get the mineral cycle working well. Yeah, and I just thought I'd throw that in there, Judith. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely very interesting. Um, Last question, low mineral turnover rate. Um, I don't know what you think about this question even. Can you think of another? I think it means, oh, I'll just launch it, sorry. I think it means that there's not a lot of minerals processing off the surface of the ground, but how do you interpret that question, Jeff?
I think that if the minerals are not, I would think it's not cycling. There's a low mineral turnover, so it'll be a poor mineral cycle. And we're looking for a favourable mineral cycle, so I'd put false at that one, Judith. Yeah, some of these questions are a bit sort of double-edged, aren't they? You have to think about them a little bit, but if you haven't got mineral turning over, it definitely wouldn't call that a very good mineral cycle.
Yeah. Okay, so next question is the discussion question. Why is it important to know the three parts of the mineral cycle in brittle tending environments? And this I've stolen from another one of the websites, but I thought it was quite an interesting because it includes the carbon and the nitrogen that are coming out of the atmosphere as well. But also you've got your leaves and things going onto the ground, going down, and then you've got the cycle coming up. And I'll just go back up to the overlay, Savory's course materials, and I couldn't pick this up, so this is why I'm pointing this out. It took me a fair while to point this out. I don't know whether you guys picked this up straight away, but there's the minerals to the surface, then there's above the ground to the surface, and then there's the surface back to the underground. So those are the three parts of the mineral cycle that he's referring to in this particular question down here. So, yeah, why is it important to know the three parts of the mineral cycle in brittle tending environments?
Yeah, well, Judith gave us the answer there. I think that's great. But Judith and I were discussing, well, what is different? We often learn about the carbon cycle and hear about the carbon, like birth, growth and decay, etc. So it's basically the same, I think, only they call it the mineral cycle, I guess, because you're including a lot of other stuff as well. Is that the way you read it, Judith? Or what's the difference between the carbon cycle and the mineral cycle, really? I guess is my question. Maybe I should have put it in the chat box.
I've decided that the carbon cycle is actually part of the mineral cycle, looking at this diagram.
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, that you've got nitrogen and all of the other minerals as well, and that carbon is a very big part of what's cycling. I think, Savory talks about it in one of the videos about the mineral cycle, and I suppose all of them are like the economy. So the faster you can get them to cycle, and that point that you talked about with Shane Joyce as well, Jeff, about, the sooner you can get it cycling. So, old mate, as soon as he got his new property, the first thing he did was went and tried to get his bugs working and trying to get it working. The quicker you can get it running, and I had the slide about the learning, the learning site, the can do site here, and you said, oh no, I think you should get in and try it on your whole property. Don't worry about trying it on a little space. And that's the point. When you do get it, you just think, well, why would I have that on a little demonstration site when I can apply that to the whole of my property? And the same thing happened when we did the comprehensive monitoring. We were just going to do it on the demonstration site, and Dad came out with us to have a look at it, and he hadn't even told me that he was doing it on the whole of the property. He said, oh no, as soon as he got it, the penny dropped. He went, "Oh no, we're doing this to the whole property. We're not just doing it to the demonstration site." So, I think about the cycle is that it is a continuous thing, and having Brian talked to us about, if you've got grass standing, that's part of your factory that's not working. If you've got bare soil there, that's part of what you own. That's a part of your factory, but your workers aren't working and you're not producing anything. And I think that's about the mineral cycle, is that it has to cycle, has to continue cycling. And I had the opportunity to do a course with Julia Telford last year. She's great. And she, was talking about the fact that really the problem with what, you can say there's too many humans or all this sort of stuff, or we use cars, we pollute the air and all these sort of things. But really when you get down to it, is that the problem with humans is that we stop these cycles from happening, and we could solve a lot of our problems if we would just allow all of our cycles to happen. But we're just sort of a bit like sheep. You get them towards the creek and there'll be a little bit of water running there, and they'll just about think, oh, we'll just about get across there, and then they got to go back. They feel uncomfortable and they think, oh no, stop, 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 we got to go back, and they'll often turn around, and then you'll have to point them out again, and get them to go across. And I think that this cycle, if we can get that the faster you can cycle it, but it seems to be counterintuitive to us humans. We sort of think, oh no, if you can keep everything green, or if we can keep everything in this particular situation or this particular status, then that'd be great. But that's not how nature sees it, and it just seems once people get it, do you think they actually can actually process this cycle? And you sort of think, oh well, I've got a drought reserve, so I've got a paddock, and I'm going to keep the paddock there. I'll keep that paddock as my drought reserve. That's what human thinking is, isn't it? You think, oh, I'll keep that paddock, that grass there, but that grass is not going to stay useful, and so you're better off to use it. And that's what the cycles are. I think you told me that, Jeffrey. Better to actually utilize all that you've got, and then to be ready for the next step. And so for me, that's what it really means about this mineral cycle anyway.
Yeah, good, Judith. That was good. I think you're right. I didn't mean to pour cold water on your learning site or your little site, but I was just thinking,
No, not at all.
if everyone's going to do that, it's a lot of work for everyone to do. But we should just go and see someone that's doing it properly. That's what this is all about, learning from each other, and that's what we want to do through the hub. We hope we can encourage people to join up and just have a look. If someone has got a learning site or a little place set up, well, let's go and check it out. But then you'll get questions like, oh yeah, but you wouldn't be able to do that over the whole place because you just manage that with the cattle when it needed, etc., etc. But I think you can do it over the whole place, and that's what holistic is, using everything that you've got, of course. So yeah, no, that's just my view on that, Judith. I think we probably need to jump on a bus and go and have a look where someone's doing this correctly.
Yeah.
And once we've get proved on it, I think we'll realise that just setting up a little place by itself and just doing it on a quarter of the place even would probably be not that beneficial, So what, you probably waste 5 years thinking, oh yeah, it does work, so then you're 5 years down the track. I think there's enough proof out there now that we could go and say that this is working pretty well on a lot of places where they're doing it properly. Just jump in, boots and all, that'd be my idea.
Absolutely. So the next little section, I just put in the chat box any questions, guys, just if anyone had anything they wanted to bring up. I think next week, Gavin, we might get you onto the presenter part so I can get you speaking, because I'm not confident I can get you speaking in this little section here. We might have to have a practice during the week if that's where we're going with that. I just wanted to put this slide up. So Peter and Narelle Companoni came in the week before last, and they shared with me this book which was called Managing by Holes. It's actually called Grassroots Restoration, Holistic Management for Villages, and it's available online. I've given you the URL. It's quite a big file. I tried to send it via a few emails, and most email boxes don't like it. It's too big. And I was having a talk to Jeffrey about it, and I think it's just fascinating because it's written for villages in Zimbabwe, and I think Zimbabwe is so different from here. You think about the life that we have and we think we're pretty privileged, right? We have so much money compared to them, and we just seem so rich, and it's not comparable. And yet when you look at what they write, so this is an excerpt that I'm going to share with you. Basically it's holistic management, but it's it's the essence. I won't say it's simplified. I'll say it's the essence. If you could condense and just get the essence of holistic management into this 40-page booklet, then you can grab this booklet and it definitely, you go through all the sections, but in very high detail. So, and this was a bit of what was going on last week at the Land Care Conference, which is very interesting. So this is a little village what they've called Makusa. It's fictional, but it represents a whole lot of things. But basically, it says in the booklet, government experts are convinced that Makusa has too many animals because 2 years out of 3 they run out of grass before the raining season. And I think the DNR or DAF or all of the CSRO probably think that, outback Queensland has too many animals because we tend to run out of grass, every third year. So now the villagers, they actually insist that the problem is lack of rain because when the rain is good, they have enough grass. And, you know, when Brian came out, he put up the statistics. I haven't got the slide here, but there is a couple of slides for the rainfall from Mitchell, and it just shows the last 100 years and the rainfall. When you look at the yearly rainfall, it's variable and it's part of our environment, but it hasn't actually changed. And so the villagers, they want the government to give them cottonseed and cake and grain in bad years, which is just like most of our landholders because they want to get drought concessions and freight and those sort of things. And so it says, well, actually the problem is energy flow because cutting down the livestock will not necessarily change the fact that the plants are not capturing as much energy as they might. And bringing in grain or feed from other areas just brings in, and it steals from another area that is productive into this area that's not productive. So when you think about this, it's not actually a very productive solution. And the DNR, they say destock, and if you talk to anyone who comes out, they say, oh, did you destock because of the drought? And we actually destocked too, Jeffrey. We sold a whole lot of our really good breeding ewes. And I doubt that we will actually now that we're doing this particular, but we actually did that under advice because we had to do something. We were just in a particularly bad situation, but it's just fascinating to me. And so actually when it comes down to it, the answer is that you actually have to increase the number of plants. So you improve your water cycle to favour the plants with those bigger leaves, which is what we were talking about. And it also allows that succession to advance to the level of your perennial plants. And we saw that with the herbage that grew through the winter. And Brian was warning me, I kept the grazing plan open and he was saying, oh, you should be probably closing it. I don't think anything's growing. And the grass wasn't growing, but the forage, the green forage, was. And I was saying, but the herbage is gone. And as soon as it actually warmed up, it actually just disappeared. It actually just almost over a day or 2 days just went flick and it was gone. And I thought, yeah, that was the thing. I mean, Brian is so patient with us, and here I am going, no, 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 Brian, it's still open. The grazing plan's still open because he said, but no, the grass has got growing. But I wouldn't be convinced. But this is some of the learning that I'm taking out of this. That next year we might actually do it a little bit different. But as it happened, we haven't run into any problems with it yet, but we may do in the future. So it's still something to look at. But just looking at that succession and getting your perennial plants, and I guess with cattle you probably don't find that they feed, but with the sheep operation, that green herbage, that means a lot to you. So that's that difference between cattle and sheep, where a sheep bloke will go, no, it's still growing.
I think with cattle, sorry Judith, I'll just come in. I think with cattle it is exactly the same, and they've had a fair bit of rain down New South. We're probably on the bit of a borderline here of it around Mitchell, but anywhere south of here sort of grows a lot of herbage in the winter time, and cattle do get a lot of feed of it. But I think with grazing type animals, and especially breeding animals, this is complicated a bit because the hardest thing we do is match the amount of cattle and the amount of animals we've got to the feed that we grow. So we're not sure, how much feed we're going to grow in a year. So you've got to have that drought relief or the drought sort of bit to put away for drought or whatever, a little bit up your sleeve because you're never sure when the rain's coming. And with our breeding animals that we invest a lot of genetics and stuff into, we don't want to sell them. So it's one of the hardest things we do is match that grazing to the amount of cattle, forage to cattle, whatever we want to call it. So it is very difficult, and I think a lot of people do get into trading animals when they get into this properly because they can do that so much better. You can just buy and sell, and you haven't got those big lot of money invested in genetics and stuff. So yeah, just a comment, but I just realised that's the hardest thing we do is match the carrying capacity.
Yeah, I agree, Jeffrey. I'm just laughing because one day Dad said to me about bought sheep. It was like bought biscuits, you know. What the hell are bought sheep? Well, they're sheep that you buy, and the problem with trading is that you have to pay money for them. And his argument for why he likes breeding is because they're free sheep to him, homemade sheep. I thought it was a funny thing to say. It was a very odd thing to say. Well, they're bought sheep, he said. I just had this here. I think I designed this on the way back from Zimbabwe, but just if you're going to, the essence of it is really just keeping that grazing ground covered for the mineral cycle. In particular, if you've got that ground covered, as soon as you get that ground bared up, you seem to run into so many problems with your mineral cycle. Not only, your moisture's gone, so all your little critters, leave, and then you've got no protection. You've got whole lot of evaporation, and you haven't got anything on the surface there to get it started. And that was one thing that came up yesterday as well. They were asking us if the guys from Sydney were asking us if we thought the yeoman's or keyline ploughing was suitable. And Jeff, I remember your answer was, well, if you got livestock, well, you'd use them. If you were so bare that you had nothing left, well, you might be forced to pay money to use a plough. But if you had livestock, well, they'd be your plough.
Yeah, I think that's what we've got to get our head around. You could probably use your livestock. I think as long as you just want to do grazing, I think it's great. They do the job. They do the job great.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to get our head around. Yeah, I'm not sure. I probably don't know much about the Hayman thing, but I think you probably need a property that suits it better. I think our country would be a bit too steep, but we're sort of up in the headwaters of the Marinara, and it's fairly steep country. We have to keep it sort of pretty. Yeah, we just need to retain that water where it falls. Healthy perennial plants are good at storing it and infiltrating it and storing it there and use it where it falls. Much as we can save, a bit like the minerals, as much as we can save. So yeah, very good session, Judith. I don't know if we've nearly finished or what's this? How we going now?
Yeah, I'm nearly finished. This was
You got more? Yeah.
No, just I just wanted to put up this resource. So if people, the Savory hub, say if you look at savory.global, and I've got the link here to this document, which is where I do still a lot of the photos and things. If I don't have photos of my own, I was just really being a little bit academic and letting people know that I do still photos from around the place. And in this case, this was somewhere where I got a few photos, so I thought I'd reference that. So we've still got the Mitchell Learning Site visit coming up. I've just had an email from Brian Marshall today, and we're still on track with that. We haven't set a date. We're sort of waiting for some other things to be finalised, but we're still going to go ahead with that and contact a whole lot of people out in the region. And I was just going to say next week was next part of the unit is community dynamics in depth next week. So we'll have a go at those questions next week if people want to get in and have a go at the materials before they come online. That was all I was going to say.
Yeah, thanks, Judith. And I was just going to say too about when Alan comes, it'd be great to have a bit of a in-depth discussion or a bit of a plan for where we want to go with this. Judith and I are open where we want to take it. I quite enjoy coming in and having a talk about it. I appreciate all the work Judith does for it. And I think it's a great thing. I think, but we want to get feedback from people, see where they want to go, whether we keep doing this, after we get accredited to the course, we'll be able to sign up and you'll be able to do the course online, which is pretty interesting and relatively cheap. So yeah, any feedback would be great. And we just want to see where it goes. It's pretty exciting for us. We're not sure where it's going, but I'm sure we're all going to get something out of it. Well, I hope we do anyway.
Well, if nothing else, it ensures that I actually go through the course materials a second time, so I get to learn. I always get something more out of it every time I go through it. And as you can see, we were going around looking for the book. We've both read the book several times, and yet we go back to the book. So you know, there's just so much to learn. It's every time you think that you've got it all sorted, nature turns around and does something a little bit different, and you think, oh well, you know, I think that's a nice thing. It's not a recipe. It's something where, you know, it's a huge resource, and it doesn't matter what nature does, what corner that you turn, you can sort of think about it and find a way through. It's not oh, that doesn't fit that particular recipe. You can sort of you can adapt it to however you've got it. And you know, great examples here today. I think Jeffrey, you talking about cattle, and I'm talking about, you know, we've got predominantly sheep, and you know, our country's very different. We'll have to invite you over to see Dreamland, Jeffrey, so you can see what I'm talking about. But you know, you're up in the headwaters of the Marinara, and it's much more rugged than where we are. We've cleared a lot of land. We're very clear compared to you. So, and I've seen photos of, you know, Peter Campbell's been showing me photos during the week, and you know, there again, you know, he's down on the floodplains of the Condamine River, and it's entirely different. So, you know, even within Queensland, you've got the most, you know, diverse, different people and different operations. He's got a sheep merino sheep stud, and different environment as well. So just like you, Jeffrey, I really enjoy doing it every week. That's why I keep going, and I'm really hoping that lots of people will get some interest or some enthusiasm out of it. And I really think that it's the future of land care. You know, I was a bit disappointed last week. I think that a lot of people, you know, might know where land care is going, but I'm very sure that this is the future of land care. You know, your carbon in the soils, the emissions reduction fund, and getting that sorted out, and getting your grazing sorted out, and starting to be, you know, not a weight on the economy, but starting to become a really useful part of the economy in Australia. And I think that this is the way that we're going to do it. And we'll probably do it one person at a time by the look of it now. But I think that we have got a lot in store for us in the future, and I can certainly see this being a very useful vehicle for us for the next couple of years at least. So we'll leave it there. Do you have any parting comments, Jeffrey?
No, thanks, Judith. You said that well. That's great. Just please be involved. Please give us feedback. Tell us the direction you want to go. But I think it's all about learning. It's all about looking, watching the animals, watching your plants, and just see where it takes us.
All right. Well, thanks very much for those of you that joined us on the lunch hour, and thanks very much for those people who also listened to us on the replay later on at night. All right. We'll leave it there, and thank you very much for your attendance today.